My name is Savannah Evans, 34 years old, and the owner of a small, sustainable fashion boutique in Louisville, Kentucky. I've spent the better part of a decade carving out a name for myself in the eco-conscious design world, pouring my passion into hand-dyed silks and recycled fabrics, hoping that one day, my parents would finally see my worth as a professional, not just a wayward daughter. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for that Sunday family dinner. It was supposed to be our usual monthly gathering at their sprawling home in the Anchorage suburb. Good food, strained small talk, perhaps a few practiced laughs. I walked in with a vintage bottle of my father's favorite Cabernet Sauvignon, thinking this would be the day I finally received a genuine nod of approval. Then, halfway through the meal, without preamble or warning, my parents dropped a bombshell that shattered the fragile peace. The $200,000 we gave you, Savannah. We need to know, what exactly did you do with it? My father, Robert Evans, asked. His voice was sharp, cutting through the clink of silverware, his eyes locked on me with cold accusation. I froze, my fork hovering inches from my mouth. $200,000. What are you talking about, Dad? I managed to choke out, my heart instantly starting a frantic, panicked drumbeat. My brother, Blake Evans, sitting across the mahogany table from me, went utterly pale. His hands gripped his water glass so tightly I thought the crystal would shatter into 1,000 pieces. My mother, Eliza Evans, a retired bank manager, sat beside Dad, her face unnervingly unreadable. She didn't offer a word of defense. The air in the room became thick, suffocating, like the walls themselves were closing in. I tried to force a small, nervous laugh, desperately hoping this was a bizarre mistake or a poor attempt at a joke, but Dad simply slid a bank statement across the linen tablecloth. It bore my name, or at least, something agonizingly close. My stomach dropped, the pit of fear replacing the hunger I'd felt minutes before. What was going on? Why was Blake staring down at his plate, avoiding my gaze? I had no idea that this single dinner conversation was about to unravel every single truth I thought I knew about my family. We're just getting into the heart of this dramatic personal narrative. A tale of shocking betrayal where financial ruin was blamed on the wrong sister. If you've ever had a family moment that turned your world upside down, or if you know the struggle of trying to earn approval, please take a moment to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps these raw, honest stories of courage and truth alive. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss new content. And if you've faced a similar moment of confusion or accusation, drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one. To understand why that question, $200,000, shook me to my core, you need to understand the deep, structural divide in the Evans family. I was raised in the Louisville suburbs where my brother, Blake, 2 years my senior, and I were inseparable as children. He was my protector, always taking the fall when I broke Mom's antique porcelain or spilled grape juice on the carpet. Those carefree days made me believe our bond was unbreakable, that we would always be a unified front. My father, Robert Evans, 65, was a self-made man who started with a single historic inn and meticulously built it into a highly respected chain of historic Louisville inns. A lucrative portfolio focused on restoring beautiful, Bourbon-era properties across Kentucky. He was driven by an almost religious ambition, constantly talking about building a legacy, expecting both Blake and me to carry the Evans name into the family business. He measured success solely in signed contracts and profits earned, and he expected us to follow his precise blueprint. My mother, Eliza Evans, 62, a highly competent bank manager before her retirement, always stood quietly by Dad's side, managing their finances with unnerving precision. She rarely challenged him. Her role was defined by his vision, her agreement a silent, constant presence in our home. Blake was their golden child. He jumped into the hotel business right out of high school, charming high-profile clients and closing major renovation deals with natural ease. When he successfully led the opening of a new, flagship boutique hotel in Frankfort, Dad was over the moon. "That's my son," he'd beam at every family gathering, his voice filled with admiration and pride. Mom would nod, her reserved smile dedicated entirely to Blake, as if he alone carried the immense weight of their hopes and the Evans name. They saw him as the unchallenged future of the Evans legacy. I had a different dream. I loved sketching clothes, creating designs that felt like small pieces of my soul, When I told my parents I wanted to study fashion design at a university in Chicago, Dad dismissed it instantly. That's a fantasy, Savannah. A costly hobby, he said, his tone sharp and dismissive. Mom simply looked away, suggesting I choose something solid and dependable, like Blake. I refused to give up. I moved to Chicago, spending countless, sleepless nights in the university design studio, hand-stitching fabrics and refining my craft. I was fiercely determined to succeed on my own terms, without their approval or the safety net of the family business. But their comparisons were relentless. Every time I returned home, the refrain was the same. Blake is making waves in the Lexington market, Dad would say, completely ignoring my latest portfolio of designs. You should learn his business discipline, Savannah. Mom would add, your brother is carrying our name. Why not choose a path that contributes to the family legacy? I would bite my lip, forcing a smile, but their words stung. I felt like an alien in my own family. My life's work dismissed as a childish whim. Blake was the shining star, I was the one who didn't belong. As the years passed, Blake began to pull away. He'd skip my calls, send only one-word replies, always claiming to be too busy with the hotel's rigorous demands. I assumed he was simply caught up in Dad's suffocating world, shouldering their immense expectations. I didn't see the flicker of strain in his eyes, the subtle way he would fidget when we talked. I was too consumed by my own fight, pouring my heart into my boutique to prove I wasn't a failure. But those years of being constantly compared to Blake, of feeling perpetually invisible, were slowly building a thick, emotional wall between us. A wall I didn't know was about to come crashing down. After college, fueled by a desire for independence, I poured every spare dime and ounce of effort into my fashion boutique, Thread and Bloom. I moved back to Louisville, opening a small shop in the vibrant Highlands neighborhood. My focus was purely on sustainable designs, elegant dresses made from ethically sourced, recycled fabrics and jackets dyed with eco-friendly pigments. The boutique quickly gained a loyal following. Local lifestyle blogs praised my work, and customers raved about the unique, high-quality pieces. It was exhausting but exhilarating. Seeing my unique designs come to life made every late night worth the effort. I thought I was finally building something real, something that could finally earn their respect. Meanwhile, Blake was running the day-to-day operations of historic Louisville inns. He was still the golden child, the one they trusted with the Evans legacy. Dad would boast endlessly about Blake's latest deals, how he secured partnerships with major travel agencies and navigated complex historic preservation permits. Mom would nod along, her eyes sparkling with pride, calling him the perfect heir to the entire empire. But what they didn't know, what none of us knew, was that Blake was in deep, catastrophic trouble. He had been sinking vast sums of the hotel's operating capital into risky, high-return investments, specifically a doomed cryptocurrency mining fund he was chasing to impress Dad. When those speculative investments predictably tanked, they left the hotel chain with staggering, hidden losses. He also carried a substantial, secret debt from high-stakes online poker, which he had also tried to cover with company funds. Every time I saw my parents, the old, familiar comparisons hit hard. I'd bring photos of my boutique's latest collection, hoping for a shred of validation. Dad would give them a cursory glance and say, flatly, nice, Savannah. But Blake's closing $250,000 deals on historic restoration projects. Mom would add, your brother is keeping the family name strong. You could really take a cue from him on business acumen. Their words stung, making me feel like I was still a teenager chasing a silly, expensive hobby. I landed a feature in a major regional magazine, and was even invited to a prestigious regional fashion expo. But when I proudly told my parents, Dad simply shrugged. That's cute, dear, he said. But it's not exactly running a real business with hundreds of employees and a corporate board, is it? The tension in our family grew thicker than Kentucky summer air. I tried to talk to Blake, hoping to reconnect, but he was always distracted. He'd check his phone mid-conversation, barely responding to my questions about his life. I'm fine, Savannah. Too much on my plate, he'd snap, brushing me off. I thought he was just stressed from managing Dad's heavy expectations. I didn't know he was drowning in a sea of his own disastrous mistakes, desperately hiding the losses from everyone. I pushed harder at the boutique, taking on demanding custom orders and collaborating with local artists for exclusive lines. My shop finally started turning a respectable profit, enough to hire a part-time assistant. I was proud, but my success felt hollow without my parents' support. I started avoiding family gatherings, dreading the inevitable, painful comparisons. Blake and I were now worlds apart. I missed the brother who'd once had my back, but I didn't know how to reach the hardened, secretive man he had become. I didn't know it then, but the truth about him was about to change everything. That Sunday started like any other family dinner, but it quickly devolved into a nightmare of accusation. I arrived, armed with the unopened bottle of Cabernet I had hoped would spark a pleasant conversation about my boutique's recent surge in business. We sat around the heavy dining table, and for a few minutes, everything felt normal. Dad launched into a long, animated story about a new hotel deal, and Mom shared updates about her book club. I smiled, waiting for my moment. Then, the mood shifted dramatically. Dad set his fork down, his face instantly hardening into a mask of corporate seriousness. He pulled a thin, manila folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. "Savannah, we need to talk, and we need to talk now," he said, his tone sharp and commanding. My heart sank immediately. Mom looked intensely uneasy, but remained silent as Dad opened the folder, revealing several pages of official-looking bank statements. These show 200,000 transferred out of the hotel's line of credit and into a private account. "The account is under your name," he said, his eyes drilling into mine. I stared at the papers, my mind a blank. The numbers were clear, the dates precise, but they made absolutely no sense. I had never seen that account, never touched that amount of money. "I don't know what this is," I said, my voice trembling. "This isn't mine." Dad's expression did not soften. "Don't lie to us, Savannah," he snapped, the accusation chilling. "This is a serious matter of theft and financial malfeasance." I looked desperately at Blake, pleading for the brother who was supposed to be my protector, but he was staring fixedly at his plate, his face pale, his hands clenched beneath the table. He said not a single word. He wouldn't even look up. Mom tried a tentative intervention, her voice soft. "Perhaps there's a misunderstanding, Robert," she said, but Dad cut her off instantly. "No, Eliza. This is clear, documented evidence." I felt the room closing in on me, my chest tight with the shock of the accusation and the crushing betrayal of their immediate distrust. How could they possibly think I, the one who worked outside their system, the one they called frivolous, would commit outright theft? Dad's voice dropped, growing colder. "You have 1 week to return the principal, Savannah, or I am calling the police and pressing charges." The words hit like a physical punch. I opened my mouth to protest, to scream my innocence, but nothing came out. Mom reached across the table for my hand, her eyes pleading. "Just explain, Savannah," she whispered, but her voice wavered, a devastating signal that she wasn't sure of me either. I pulled my hand away, tears stinging my eyes. Blake still hadn't spoken, his silence louder and more damning than any direct accusation. I couldn't stay there. I stood abruptly, grabbing my coat, leaving the unopened bottle of expensive Cabernet sitting mockingly on the table. I drove home in a daze, the Louisville streetlights blurring through my tears. My parents, the people who were supposed to be my anchors, thought I was a thief, and Blake, the brother who'd once been my closest ally, hadn't offered a single word in my defense. The pain was raw, a gaping wound. I replayed the dinner in my mind. Why hadn't Blake spoken up? What was he hiding? I didn't have answers, but one thing was terrifyingly clear. I had to find the truth. I couldn't let this devastating accusation destroy me. Not after everything I'd worked for. As I sat in my quiet apartment, staring at the bank statements I'd photographed, a cold fire ignited inside me. I was not going to let this stand. I had spent years fighting to prove myself, building my boutique from nothing, only to be doubted at every turn. This was different. This was personal, and it was criminal. I didn't know how that money ended up in an account with a version of my name, but I was going to figure it out and expose the architect of this deception. The next morning, I closed my shop for a few hours and headed straight to the bank, my mind sharp and focused. At my personal bank, a manager quickly reviewed my accounts. As expected, they were clean. No sign of the 200,000, no strange deposits or transfers. A brief wave of relief hit me, but it vanished instantly. The account my parents had shown me wasn't mine, and I needed to know why it bore my name. I drove to a different institution, one historically tied to the Evans family's business accounts, and asked about the mysterious transfer. After some professional maneuvering, the clerk revealed the recipient account was under the name Savannah E. Evans. My name is Savannah A. Evans. The middle initial was off, but the similarity was deliberate and calculated. Someone had created this account with the explicit intention of pointing the finger directly at me. My heart hammered with a terrible mix of fear and certainty. I snapped detailed photos of the transfer documents, knowing I was onto something far bigger and more sinister than a simple mistake. Back at my apartment, I called Chloe Davis, a sharp accountant I'd met through a small business collaboration. Chloe was a wizard with forensic accounting and had an uncanny knack for spotting financial inconsistencies. I sent her the photos, and we spent hours dissecting the records. Chloe uncovered a name linked to the transaction: Mike Jenkins, a recent, mid-level hire at historic Louisville Inns. His security login had been used to access the company's financial system when the fake account was established. An email trail showed he had coordinated with Blake on the fund transfers, though the details of the transactions were deliberately vague. My stomach twisted. Could my own brother really be behind this malicious setup? I found Blake that night at a quiet, upscale bar in Louisville's trendy Nulu district, nursing a glass of bourbon at a corner table. His phone screen glowed, casting harsh shadows on his tense, wary face. I sat across from him, my pulse hammering, the evidence burning a hole in my pocket. "We need to talk, Blake," I said, keeping my voice low but firm. He glanced up, irritation flickering in his eyes. "What's this about, Savannah? I told you I'm busy." I slid the key document, the one with the false middle initial, across the table. "This has my name on it," I said. "But it's not mine. You know why, don't you?" Blake's jaw instantly tightened, his fingers pausing on his glass. He didn't deny it. Instead, he leaned back, exhaling heavily, defeated. "I screwed up," he finally admitted, his voice barely audible, a mixture of confession and self-pity. He admitted he had systematically siphoned the money from the hotel's line of credit, chasing a high-risk cryptocurrency deal that promised big, quick returns. It had spectacularly collapsed, leaving a gaping, urgent hole in the hotel's operating accounts. To hide his catastrophic failure, he'd worked with Mike Jenkins to create the fake account, using the name close to mine, Savannah E. Evans, to deliberately shift the crushing suspicion onto me. "I didn't think they'd push it this far, Savannah," he muttered, but his words lacked any genuine regret. I was floored when Dad pulled out the statement. "You let Mom and Dad believe I stole $200,000 from the family business?" I asked, my voice shaking with raw disbelief. Blake finally met my gaze, his expression hardened by self-preservation. "You made it easy," he said, his words a vicious, unexpected slap. "You're always off with your boutique, doing your own thing, not contributing to the legacy. They were bound to doubt you, not me. I'm the one upholding the Evans name." His words cut deeper than any of Dad's baseless accusations. This was the brother who had once been my confidant, my protector, now coldly blaming me for his lies. Fury surged through me, hot and absolute. "You turned on me," I said, my hands trembling. "I trusted you, Blake. You are not the brother I loved." He showed no remorse, just shrugged and sipped his drink, retreating into his shell of entitlement. "You don't understand the immense pressure I'm under," he said, shifting the blame again. "The hotels, Dad's demands, the legacy, it's crushing me. You're free of all that. You just design dresses." I stood up, my vision blurring with angry, burning tears. "You are not the brother I loved," I repeated, my voice cracking with the finality of a broken bond, and I walked away. He didn't try to stop me. Back home, I sat in the dark, the weight of Blake's betrayal crushing me. The evidence Chloe and I had uncovered was clear, undeniable proof, but it couldn't erase the deep, lacerating pain. My brother, the one I had once looked up to, had deliberately thrown me to the wolves to save himself. I clutched the bank records, my resolve hardening to steel. I would clear my name, not just to prove my parents wrong, but to expose Blake's staggering deception to everyone. 2 days later, I discovered something far, far worse about Blake. Chloe Davis texted me with alarming news. A rival, mid-tier boutique in Louisville had launched a new collection that bore an uncanny resemblance to my own signature sustainable designs. Right down to the specific, complex, hand-drawn eco-friendly patterns I had spent months laboring over. My stomach dropped. Those detailed designs were my heart and soul, shared only with my most trusted contractors. Chloe suspected corporate espionage and suggested I immediately check my boutique's cloud-based email server logs. Digging through the system, I found a series of damning emails. An email from Blake's personal account to the rival boutique's owner, attaching high-resolution files of my sketches and offering them, for quick cash, to clear some urgent debts. A follow-up message confirmed my absolute worst fears. Blake had been drowning in even more high-stakes online poker and sports betting losses, not just the cryptocurrency failure, and he had sold my intellectual property, my original work, to pay them off. I was utterly devastated. After the fake account setup, this felt like a betrayal so profound it bordered on the psychotic. My own brother had maliciously attacked my career, the one thing I had built entirely on my own. I called Chloe, who immediately jumped into action. Together, we scoured my cloud backups, recovering deleted texts where Blake boasted to a friend about making quick, easy money from Savannah's silly dress designs. We compiled a comprehensive dossier emails, retrieved texts, and access logs that clearly showed Blake had breached my boutique's private digital system. I couldn't possibly let this final act of sabotage slide. I decided to confront my entire family. Not just Blake, but Mom and Dad too. They needed to know the crushing truth about their golden child before his recklessness destroyed everything they had built. That night, I drove to my parents' house. The evidence folder clutched so tightly my fingers ached. The living room felt impossibly cold as we gathered around the dining table. I didn't mince words. I laid out the truth like a surgical procedure. Blake sold my designs to a competitor, I said, spreading out the emails and texts of the illicit transaction. Has been gambling and betting online, using my work, my livelihood, to cover his monumental losses. Blake's eyes widened in genuine panic, his face paling, but he didn't even attempt to deny it. I was backed into a corner. He stammered, his voice flat with self-pity. The hotel, Dad's demands. It's crushing me. I had to do something drastic. His excuse felt like a cowardly slap, shifting the blame to our parents instead of owning his criminal actions. Dad's face hardened, not with anger at Blake, but at me. Savannah, you are making a mountain out of a molehill, he said, his tone dismissive and condescending. Blake is carrying the Evans legacy. He is under a pressure you wouldn't understand. This is a minor mistake. Mom nodded, her expression cold and resolute. You are overreacting, Savannah, she said. Your dress designs are not the family legacy. Blake is trying to keep us all afloat, and you should support him instead of attacking him. I stared at them, my heart sinking past the point of pain. They were fiercely siding with him, brushing off my entire livelihood, my independent success as utterly trivial. My voice trembled with righteous anger. You have always put him first, I said, the words heavy with 2 decades of resentment. I fought for my boutique, I earned my success, but you ignore it. Now he has intentionally sabotaged and stolen my work, and you are excusing him. The argument exploded. Blake snapped. You're too caught up in your own small world. Savannah, you have no idea what I'm dealing with? Dad raised his voice, accusing me of tearing the family apart over something he repeatedly called minor. Mom echoed him, saying I was blowing things far out of proportion and that a loyal daughter would support her struggling brother. I laid out every piece of evidence, the forged accounts, the emails, the texts, the proof of his gambling, but they waved it away, clinging desperately to the belief that Blake's actions were just a mistake. My frustration boiled over into an agonizing realization. You are blind to his faults, I cried, tears finally stinging my eyes. You have chosen him over me my entire life, and now my entire career is paying the price for your favoritism. No one yielded. Blake refused to offer a single apology. Dad kept defending the sanctity of the family legacy, and Mom backed him up, dismissing my pain as hysterical drama. I stood up, my hands shaking, and grabbed my evidence folder, securing my future. I'm done begging for your respect, or your belief, I said, my voice barely a whisper, but laced with a final, irreversible conviction. You are not my family anymore. I walked out the door, the heavy thud of the solid oak door closing behind me like the sound of a judge's gavel. As I drove away, the painful reality hit me: the Evans family was broken beyond repair. Blake's sabotage and my parents' toxic, blind favoritism had irrevocably torn us apart. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew I was done fighting for their worthless approval. 6 months later, I was living a new life, but the scars remained. I had systematically severed all ties with my parents and Blake, deleting their contacts and steering completely clear of their Louisville social circles. My boutique, Thread and Bloom, became my refuge, where I channeled my energy and my pain into a bold, new sustainable fashion line. With Chloe Davis's calm, professional guidance, I launched the collection, and it was an immediate, overwhelming hit. Local blogs raved about the designs, and customers lined up for the unique, limited edition pieces. The success felt like a quiet, profound triumph, irrefutable proof that I could thrive, succeed, and build a lasting legacy entirely without my family's blessing. The pain of their actions lingered, a quiet reminder of the trust I had lost. Chloe shared news about Blake, gathered from industry whispers. His gambling debts had spiraled completely out of control, costing him his job at historic Louisville inns when the corporate board uncovered his deep financial mismanagement. Bankruptcy followed, leaving him isolated and penniless. His destructive actions, siphoning funds, forging documents, and selling my designs, had not only ruined him but had also permanently tarnished the Evans family name. Dad and Mom, who had so fiercely defended him, paid an agonizing price too. Their blind favoritism led to their downfall. They lost both children I refused to return, and Blake became a pariah and a crushing disappointment in their eyes. The cherished Evans legacy, once their greatest pride, crumbled under the weight of their son's recklessness and their own disastrous refusal to see the truth. Dad and Mom withdrew entirely from Louisville's once eager social scene, their reputation battered by the hotel's financial struggles and Blake's escalating scandals. Chloe heard they avoided old friends, too proud and too stubborn to ever admit that they had backed the profoundly wrong child. Their silence toward me was deafening. They never called, never once apologized. Their stubborn refusal to own their mistakes cost them their only daughter and their standing in the community. The ultimate, inescapable consequence of choosing blind, toxic loyalty to Blake over simple fairness and truth toward me. Chloe was my professional and emotional anchor, offering more than just financial expertise. She spent late nights helping me plan the boutique's expansion and consistently lifted my spirits when the weight of the past felt too heavy to bear. One evening over drinks, she said, "You've built something incredible, Savannah. Their expectations and their failures do not define you." Her unwavering support reminded me that I had forged my own successful path, surrounded by a chosen family of people who genuinely valued my character and my work. Reflecting on it all, I learned painful but vital lessons that I offer to you now. Honesty is essential, but it can't always heal a fractured family. Blake's destructive greed and my parents' lifelong, corrosive bias led them to an inevitable, self-made crisis. They all faced devastating consequences for their choices. Blake lost everything. Dad and Mom lost their children and their entire, fragile legacy. I chose to walk away, and though it hurt with a deep, bone-aching it ultimately freed me to build a life true to myself. We all answer for our actions, and sometimes that means having the terrifying courage to let go of those who absolutely refuse to change. I want to hear your stories. Have you faced family pressure or betrayal that forced you to start completely over? Drop your experiences in the comments. Let's share how we find the strength to move forward, no matter the cost to old, toxic ties. Your voice could inspire someone else to keep going.